20 May, the second phase of the Red Spring Offensive has been thrown back along the entire front, with the last gap closed on the eastern front near Hang Yi by 24 May. The UN counterattack is launched immediately, driving the communists in full retreat. By the beginning of June, the pursuit, spearheaded by armored columns, has carried the Allies across the 38th parallel into North Korea, where the enemy braces and halts their retreat, forming a defense triangle anchored at Chorwon, Kumhwa, and Pyongyang. By 15 June, UN forces crack the heavy Red defenses in their so-called Iron Triangle, taking Kumhwa and Chorwon and advancing north to Pyongyang. During the week 13 to 20 June, the communist air power becomes more aggressive, but suffers heavy losses to the UN air arm. During this period, the line undergoes minor changes as the ground phase subsides to patrol action and sporadic encounters. Allied units push northward along the entire front as the tide of battle changes decisively in Korea. A tank infantry force takes up the pursuit of the exhausted Reds, who bogged down in the second stage of their unsuccessful spring drive. The enemy, who has suffered huge losses in men and materiel, is retreating toward North Korean mountain strongholds. Withdrawing along a front of more than 100 miles, Red units find themselves under constant attack from the well-organized UN troops. Enemy lines of supply and communication are placed under continuous aerial and artillery bombardment. Here, the infantrymen prepare to blast the Reds from still another hilltop with coordinated fire and high explosive shells. F-51s, in close support of the infantrymen, smash an enemy-held hill position. Muddy roads hamper the UN ground forces as they continue their offensive. The rapidity of the UN advance has cut off many large Red units fleeing the attack from the south. Artillery crews must service their guns, bad weather or not. This unit, temporarily isolated from its supplies by a washed-out bridge, waits patiently while ammo is in the process of being delivered to its frontline position. An airlift delivery of the artillery ammo has been decided on, and a break in the weather allows this resupply by air. Once considered an emergency measure, this method is now a routine logistical operation. The cargo planes, which have been dubbed by the soldiers as flying A-frames, come over in the drop zone, releasing more and more of the vitally needed ammunition. The delays caused by the strong torrential rains allow a great number of the retreating communist forces to escape north. But with their ammunition stores being constantly replenished, regardless of poor weather, UN artillery continues its heavy pounding of the enemy. The UN offensive is slowed temporarily, but continues moving into North Korea. An artillery battery prepares for a fire mission to aid UN forces in their counterattack. The men assemble a newly arrived shipment of 155mm howitzer shells for their powerful weapon. Each shell weighs 97 pounds. After stacking the shells, fuses are screwed on. The breech block is carefully cleaned and oiled during the lull between fire missions. This outfit has fired over 130,000 rounds in support of infantry, expending over 6,240 tons of shells. Here, the artillerymen adjust the equilibrator springs to balance the muzzle. Acting as a team, the men move swiftly to load the pieces. Last-second fire adjustments are completed, and the big guns go into action. As Allied units move northward, strong emplaced positions are constructed to fend off any Red counterattacks. The men await the order to press on and maintain contact with the retreating enemy units. The UN forces swiftly adapt themselves to the hilly Korean terrain. Infantrymen conceal themselves with automatic weapons in the deeply emplaced bunkers. A 75mm recoilless rifle is put to a thorough cleaning. Lieutenant General Frank Milburn visits front areas, getting a first-hand view of the pursuit of the fleeing Reds. The men jump off, continuing their part of the Allied counterattack. UN infantrymen, well armed and well supplied, are capturing large hauls of enemy prisoners for the first time in the Korean War. During this period, enemy prisoners number 10,000, more than 3 times as many as have surrendered since Red China's intervention. The enemy gives up rapidly the terrain it cost him so much to capture. The advance continues as mine detector teams search for mines scattered in the roads and paths by the somewhat disorganized foe. Out of curiosity, one soldier glances at a Red surrender pamphlet purporting to contain pleas of captured UN soldiers. From an observation post, supporting fire is directed against Red strongpoints. Mortars are set up and zeroed in. The troops strike another heavy blow against the retreating enemy. An air-ground liaison team directs an F-51 strike as the Allies continue to move forward. Talking directly to the pilots, the ground unit helps the planes pinpoint the target. Smoke rises from the burning target as the Air Force helps smash the Reds in North Korea. As the UN attack continues, Allied troops open fire with machine guns on an enemy-held area. The fire is directed against a small house that harbors the enemy. Communist prisoners are taken as the troops move down into the valley. A wounded Red soldier is captured. The troops push on against the Reds, who hold another hill beyond the valley. A powerful hail of steel is thrown into the enemy hill positions by quadruple-mounted 50 caliber machine guns. With the main communist force routed from the hill, the soldiers advance cautiously into the area to mop up possible stragglers. The men pause in their pursuit to have hot chow brought up to them in Marmite cans. The attack continues as the troops drive the last of the Red force out of the area. A Navy rocket ship loads ammunition for a night mission against Wonsan, North Korea. The purpose of the mission is to impede the southward movement of enemy troops along the coastal roads and blast Red supply dumps and communication centers. The Navy adds its help to the UN's counterattack as the bombardment begins. From 20 June to 20 July, attention in Korea is focused on Kaesong, site of ceasefire peace negotiations. The first meeting is scheduled for 10 July. The UN negotiators establish a base camp near Munsan, commuting to each of the conferences at Kaesong. On 21 July, the Communists request a recess in the peace negotiations. It has become apparent by this time that the Reds are staging a buildup of force above the neutralized Kaesong area. However, during this period, only minor changes occur in the Korean battle line as action is confined to patrols and minor clashes. This limited fighting continues as further truce developments are in the offing. From the beginning, the Kaesong story is the story of stalemate. It began late in June when Russia's Malik suggested peace talks. And of course, the North Koreans and Chinese Red volunteers were ready to listen. Kaesong has been agreed upon as a neutral zone of conference. The first representatives, with no rank to exceed that of colonel, leave Munsan, the site of the UN peace camp, on 8 July. They have been instructed to make no commitments for the UN. They are limited to establishing an agenda for future talks and to assuring safe conduct to UN delegates during the armistice meetings. They are empowered to come to agreement on what is to be discussed, to make it clear to the communists that the armistice talks must take up military matters only. With this program and these limitations clearly understood, the helicopter bearing the general's representatives takes off from Munsan. At Kaesong, the letter W, which marks the landing strip, is taken to mean welcome. Later, UN reporters insist it stands for the Korean word for stalling. Keep in mind that the communists rejected General Ridgway's suggestion that the talks be held aboard a Dutch hospital ship. They requested Kaesong, within their own lines, as a neutral meeting place. Nevertheless, the UN negotiators follow their host to the courtyard with open minds. The uniformed Chinese woman turns out to be not a high official as was first supposed, but a competent interpreter. She was the only uniformed woman they saw. The town of Kaesong gives the impression of peace and tranquility. Early pictures of the Conference on Agreement reveal nothing of the tension that prevails, of the long arguments over simple matters of procedure, nor do the UN representatives return to Munsan with much that is significant for the waiting reporters. Their attitude, their poker faces, seem to say only, wait and see. But it was later learned that during that first conference, and the one of 11 July, the communists took pictures of UN representatives being stopped at roadblocks by armed Reds. Those pictures, widely distributed throughout Asia, suggested that vanquished UN forces were seeking peace from their victorious enemy. Totally unaware of this, Admiral Joy leaves Munsan for his first meeting with the North Koreans and representatives of the Chinese communists, who have given up the pretext of being volunteers and do most of the talking. Admiral Joy is quite willing to have it so, knowing full well that the North Koreans are no longer in a position to make any decisions of their own. The communist negotiators arrive with an attitude of arrogant overconfidence. Even while the first armistice talks begin, armed Reds are in evidence within the very shadow of the conference room. True, no guns are drawn, nobody gets hurt. But the propaganda value of these pictures, also taken by the Reds and distributed throughout Asia, do irreparable harm to the stature of UN forces. The same forces which had, in truth, inflicted losses on the Reds to a ratio of 100 to 1. However, the first conference ends without incident, without too much friction, but certainly without decision. Admiral Joy could only say the talks would continue so long as there was the slightest hope for agreement. But he does not fail to observe the armed communists playing soldier, close by the medieval-like castle that is to serve as his billet. an imposing pile of stone inside of which somebody had forgot to put a latrine. But petty annoyances do not prevent the Admiral and his staff from relaxing after this first historic meeting. He is obviously aware that the Orientals will bargain with characteristic deliberation, whether they truly want peace or only time to regroup their scattered forces. Even at this first meeting with Admiral Joy, the Reds ignore General Ridgway's request that the talks be confined to military matters. But when Admiral Joy and his staff return to Munsan, the door to peace is not slammed shut. It is still ajar. Neither the delegates nor General Ridgway's staff have much to say to the anxiously waiting UN correspondents. But the reporters do learn that the Reds had full press representation at the meeting. The UN correspondents are quickly promised that they will be allowed to attend all future meetings. But even as the delegates return to Kaesong, accompanied by the press of the some 16 nations with troops in Korea, it seems that the Reds are preparing a strange welcome indeed. They did not intend to give up the power and propaganda of a single Red voice, crying its slanted news to the outside world. Already in the hands of Chinese communists was ample evidence by word and picture of how the Reds had distorted the news from Kaesong. For while the conference thus far had not even discussed the agenda originally agreed on because of the haggling of the Reds, Peking radio and newspapers were avidly reporting each meeting as a failure of the UN negotiators to meet honorable terms of the victors. This impression had to be corrected. General Ridgway bids goodbye to the correspondents. The general makes sure that all of them have availed themselves of the opportunity to report the true situation at Kaesong. But outside of Kaesong, they encounter a situation that shocks the free world. The reporters are met and stopped by armed Reds. This commissar of press relations is telling the correspondents of 16 United Nations that the world will hear of the armistice talks through the truthful communist press. Not in the history of modern ceasefire negotiations has there been such a crude breach of international law and ethics. The communists are anxious to have the rest of the vehicles continue without the newsmen, but UN officers refuse to break up the convoy. Further discussions fail to resolve the problem. The Red refusal to pass the complete convoy is relayed back to Munsan. The convoy is instructed to return if not passed by 0930. At the 0930 deadline, the vehicles turn around and head for Munsan. They promptly make their report to General Ridgway of the high-handed treatment they had received at Kaesong. The general's decision is immediate and decisive. Within a short period of time, the world was receiving General Ridgway's ultimatum from the lips of his aide, General Allen.
This is Brigadier General Frank A. Allen, Jr., United States Army, Chief of Information, United Nations Command, Advance Camp in Korea, broadcasting a message from General M.B. Ridgway, Commander-in-Chief, United Nations Command, to General Kim Il-young. Since the first meeting at Kaesong, Your delegation has placed restrictions upon the movement of our delegation. It has subjected our personnel to the close proximity of your armed guards. It has delayed and blocked passage of our couriers. It has withheld its cooperation in establishment of two-way communications with our base, even though it agreed to do so immediately. It has refused admittance to the conference area of certain personnel in our convoy, which I desired, and for whose conduct I stated as I assumed full responsibility. The extension of the present recess and the delay in resuming the conference of our delegations is solely due to these unreasonable and unnecessary restrictions against which my representatives have repeatedly protested. The assurances which I require are simple and few. They include as primary prerequisites the establishment of an agreed conference area of suitable extent, completely free of armed personnel of either side. Each delegation must have complete reciprocity of treatment to include complete and equal freedom of movement to, from, and within the agreed conference area, and complete and equal freedom at all times in the selection of the personnel in its delegation party to include representatives of the press. I therefore now propose that a circular area with its center at approximately the center of Quezon and with a 5-mile radius be agreed upon as a neutral zone. The eastern limit of the neutral zone shall be the present point of contact of our forces at Panmunjom. I propose that we both agree to refrain from hostile acts of any kind within this zone during the entire period of our conferences. I propose that we agree that the area of the conference site and the roads leading thereto, used by personnel of both delegation parties, be completely free of armed personnel. Should you continue to insist that restrictions are necessary for our personal safety or for any other reason, I propose that the conference site be moved to a locality which will afford the few simple assurances I have specified herein. Signed, M.B. Ridgway, General, United States Army, Commander-in-Chief, United Nations Command. That is all.
The communist bluff has been called. The general's terms are quickly accepted without argument. On 15 July, the armistice talks are resumed. The UN delegates return to Quezon with a full complement of reporters, radio equipment, and cameras. From now on, no white flags will be carried to be misinterpreted by enemy press, and only the agreed-on minimum of red MPs are cited. Although the Reds attempt to belittle the controversy that stalled negotiations, the UN delegation is relieved of the tension created by the ominous presence of the Reds' submachine guns. The inscrutable communist delegates give no indication that they have been caught red-handed trying to pull a fast one. Admiral Joy is hopeful of progress now, since the Reds have made their first definite concession. But though the UN correspondents now have freedom of activity, they are hard put to keep busy during the days of 15 to 21 July. The conference produces little that is newsworthy. There is, however, one happy result. For the first day within 53 weeks of fighting, 24 hours pass in which not one U.S. soldier is killed. It seems evident now that at least the communist reporters and cameramen are ready and anxious to be friendly. Another conference ends with the Reds insisting that the military demarcation line must be at the 38th parallel, and they insist on discussing political matters that must be left to the UN Assembly. The communists have given the UN negotiators assurance of complete freedom of movement within a half-mile radius of the conference building and in the neutral corridor from Munsan. Telephone communications are set up from Quezon to the Munsan peace camp. To ensure reliable radio communications, North Mountain near Seoul is selected as the site for the construction of a relay station. This station is part of the radio network connecting Munsan with 8th Army headquarters in Seoul and General Ridgway's offices in Tokyo. The altitude of the mountaintop reduces interference by surrounding hills and increases the effective range of the station. While the ceasefire talks are going on, UN commanders are keeping close contact with the enemy in the field and preventing him from gaining ground. However, it is apparent that the communists are staging a large-scale buildup of troops, particularly above Kaesong. There is formal acceptance at this time by General Nam Il of the principle that hostilities will continue until an armistice can be fully worked up. These armed Chinese being chased from the conference area are forerunners of more who will later march through Kaesong and cause still another ultimatum. During the week 15 to 21 July, the negotiators agree to list 3 points on the agenda for the ceasefire talks. 1, the physical details of stopping the fighting. 2, the definition of the ceasefire line. 3, safeguards against resumption of the fighting. The Reds also want to list another topic, to wit, the withdrawal of foreign troops from Korea. Admiral Joy refuses to accept this as part of the agenda. This firmness by the UN negotiators causes General Nam Il to request a 4-day recess, presumably for further instruction. The request is granted. The conference table is empty, except perhaps for the ever-present spirit of Jake Mully, past master of the stall and the double top. From 20 July to 20 August, the truce talks at Kaesong continue to hold the Korean spotlight, with limited ground combat resulting in only minor changes in the battle line. A small UN offensive above Kumhwa reduces a red bulge and straightens the Allied line in the central sector. To the east, continued pressure by 8th Army units gains several miles north of Inji and Yanggu. As truce negotiations threaten to break down, UN commanders are alert for any movement by the Red forces, which have been greatly strengthened in men and supplies during the period of the Kaesong conferences. In an action typical of our current hit-and-run tactics, an infantry patrol infiltrates through enemy-held territory in the rugged hills northwest of Inji. Short advances are made into hostile regions to locate Red outposts by drawing their fire. Once the enemy positions are pinpointed, the unit maneuvers to concentrate its fire and saturate the area. After inflicting all damage possible on the Red positions, the patrol will pull back within its own lines. Near Hongchon, a communications team gets final instructions before moving out to install another link in the very high-frequency radio-telephone network. The VHF stations are necessarily located on high ground, since the radio beam is limited in its range by line of sight. Mountain tops, high peaks, or ridges though difficult to reach, are the preferred sites. During the last stages of the climb, pack mules captured from the Chinese communists will carry the heavier, bulkier equipment. Because of its relative compactness and light weight, the VHF radio telephone equipment has proved extremely valuable in combat area communications. It is easily and quickly assembled, and problems created by unusual terrain features in wire laying are eliminated. During operation, a VHF station can handle 4 telephone channels simultaneously. Receivers and transmitters are carried on A-frames to the site by Korean civilians hired for the trip. Antennas are set up on the highest ground in the site area to obtain the maximum range. When the mast has been fitted together and guy lines attached, it is set into its base and raised into position. The antenna operating on a directional beam is carefully oriented in azimuth. A coaxial cable is connected with the antenna and terminated in the transmitting station located close by. Coaxial cables for both transmitting and receiving pass through the central housing. Antennas for transmitting and for receiving are raised and guyed as the installation nears completion. More supplies are moved to the station by an ingenious system of long lines and pulleys, a saving in time and manpower. Gasoline for the generator units which provide the electrical energy for the station, food and water for the crew are all hauled up the pulley shuttle system. The newly activated station is ready to make radio contact with another unit. Messages sent through the radio telephone channels pass from telephone to wire to switchboard. The carrier then separates messages into one of 4 available channels which are transmitted by the VHF radio. At the receiving end, the messages follow the same channels to reach their destinations in the field, from radio to carrier to switchboard to telephone. After a series of checks and servicing adjustments have been made, the station is considered installed and ready for operation. It provides another link in the very high-frequency radio telephone network and will contribute its part to the efficiency of our combat communication system. At an 8th Army Quartermaster supply point in Korea, refrigeration vans arrive to pick up frozen meats and vegetables. Railroad reefer cars transport the frozen foods to railhead supply depots, where huge refrigerated vans pick up the food for delivery to ration dumps in the forward area. A compact refrigeration unit housed at the front of each van maintains a constant freezing temperature inside the food storage compartment. These refrigeration units operate dependably and efficiently under the most adverse conditions, over rough roads and in all kinds of weather. The entire operation of delivering perishable foodstuffs to frontline troops must be conducted with precise timing. Delivery schedules are rigidly adhered to in order to prevent spoilage. Trucks from the fighting units coming to pick up supplies for their messes must also meet the schedule, or delays and traffic snarls result. When loading of distribution trucks is completed, they move right out, heading for their respective outfits. The nutrition and palatability of these fresh foods are a valuable morale builder for the combat troops. In spite of the driving July rains and the tough uphill going, American riflemen renew their attack to secure Hill 1179 north of Yangu. Previous attempts to take the hill have resulted in failure. Fiercely defended enemy positions force the troops to dig in preparatory to an all-out attack. The unpredictable Korean weather has proved to be as troublesome as the Reds themselves. The drive toward the hill is supported by self-propelled 155mm guns. With the aid of artillery spotters and information obtained from patrols, the big guns from this forward position concentrate their fire on known and suspected targets. Tanks coordinate their fire in the assault. Surface and air bursts clear the way for the riflemen. Strongly entrenched enemy positions are successfully eliminated from the path of the Allied advance. With a creeping barrage, a heavy mortar company joins the assault on Hill 1179 in a continuous bombardment of 4.2 shells. From firmly established positions in a nearby valley, the mortar company supports the attack by lobbing their shells in on the hill just ahead of the infantrymen. C-119 flying boxcars drop ammunition and supplies as the UN unit reorganizes after the hill is taken. Airlift operations are necessary to reach the inaccessible hills of Korea, such as this, whenever supplies cannot be readily brought in by vehicles and other standard supply methods. As the peace talks continue and the United Nations line in the north becomes stable, a mob of exhausted, rag-clad refugees swarms back toward Seoul. They gather on the south shore of the Han River, hoping to cross and return to their homes, which they abandoned when the city was last left to the enemy. Not all have returned. Thousands have died from hunger and exhaustion along the road. Exposure to weather and disease have taken countless others. Most of the refugees must be turned back because of the serious food shortage in Seoul. For the present, only farmers and their families will be allowed to re-enter the city. Military authorities must check the papers of everyone seeking to return. Children, orphaned or separated from their parents in the confusion, shift for themselves. The screening process is a heartbreaking job. Most of these people have walked hundreds of miles to get back and have waited for days to have their papers examined. Those authorized to enter the city receive typhus injections. With the city's facilities destroyed, every precaution must be taken to prevent the spread of disease. As the screening goes on, the refugees who have been processed start for the river. Burdened with their families and the few possessions they have managed to cling to, they plod across the sand to the boats that will take them home. There have been many delays, but for those who have reached the boats, the long journey is almost over. The outlook is still grim and uncertain. The city is in ruins. They will find their homes nothing more than heaps of ashes and rubble. But at least it is hope and a possible end to the months of aimless wandering. The refugees allowed to return to Seoul are fortunate compared to those who must be left behind. For these unhappy people, like thousands of others wandering through Korea today, there is not even the small comfort of a home in the ruins. During a tank infantry patrol north of Yanggu, an enemy box mine puts this Allied tank out of action. A crew member is injured in the blast. Cautious probing reveals another box mine nearby, which is carefully deactivated and removed. The men gather materials to aid in bracing the tank as a tank retriever is ordered up from the rear. Mud and rain, the universal enemies of the soldier, slow down the work. The crippled M4 will be hauled back to maintenance shops in the rear, where skilled repair crews will quickly put it back into action. On 27 July at the Kaesong truce talks, the Reds agree to an agenda, leaving the question of withdrawal of foreign troops to political conferences. The most important question still to be settled is the military demarcation line. Tape recordings are made of the discussions. British and Australian communist correspondents Alan Winnington and Alfred Burchett cover the talks with the Red delegation. Red propaganda posters appear even in Kaesong. With the meeting at an end, General Na-mil and his Chinese colleagues leave to report to their superiors. The convoy of United Nations negotiators returning from Kaesong find themselves isolated when the pontoon bridge over the Imjin River is washed away during one of the many unpredictable floods in the area. An attempt to rescue an army captain marooned on one of the pontoons is made by helicopter. Too weak to hold a line let down to him, the attempt is abandoned and a small boat puts out to rescue him. Personnel in the isolated convoy were airlifted by helicopter to Munsan in a 2-hour shuttle operation. As the peace party leaves Munsan for the August 5th meeting, the agenda question of a military demarcation line has yet to be settled. At Kaesong, Admiral Joy and General Craigie hope to meet the Reds on more amiable terms. They are in for a rude shock. In direct violation of the terms laid down for the truce talks, the communists have unaccountably permitted a unit of 83 Chinese soldiers in full battle dress to enter the neutral area. Fully armed with mortars, rifles, pistols, and submachine guns, they make their camp within full view of the conference headquarters. An Allied photographer is threatened away by the commander of the Red unit. The shortest session to date was terminated by Admiral Joy after 7 minutes, during which he accused the Reds of the violation. An empty conference room symbolizes the gulf between communism and democracy. Admiral Joy reports the neutrality violation to General Ridgway. The UN negotiators are called back to Tokyo. General Naumiel, with a sheepish smile, apologizes for the incident. After the meeting with General Ridgway in Tokyo, negotiations are resumed. A possible subject for discussion, a change of site for the truce talks. This is the hill. It doesn't really matter what hill. They were all pretty much the same. A desolate hunk of rugged, sharp-rising terrain in Korea, where our men lived too long. Or maybe died too soon. What was it like toward the end? The same as it had been for months, more than 2 years. It was a holding operation. Probably the last spot on Earth they wanted to be, that hill. But nobody was going to push them off it. It was danger, patrol, 9, 10, 20 men going out to contact the enemy. 9, 10, 20 men coming back. Because the deal was you all came back or none of you did, whichever way the ball bounced. It was boredom, digging the trenches deeper, piling the sandbags higher, thicker. It was just about the biggest thing in a man's life, mail call. A letter from home, whether it announced the birth of a new baby son or the death of an old cow, it was bigger news to the addressee than the rise or fall of an empire. But mostly, toward the end, it was waiting. Not too much happening, killing time maybe, but trying to make sure time didn't kill you. A big picture reporter checked into that at a Hill command post.
Ruth, okay?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. How's things going out there,
Yes, sir.
Ronnie?
No enemy in sight. No one
What?
come around. Report, sir.
You ain't had no rounds in since this morning, huh?
No, I have to get them through supply.
Okay, then keep your eyes open and keep a lookout.
Yes, sir.
Roger out.
No, they should be in some
Pretty good
time,
communications here,
tomorrow,
don't
the next day, though.
you? Lieutenant, got pretty good communications.
Right. First class.
Number one.
Does that go out to the squads and platoons?
We have the artillery FO,
Okay, sir.
French casino, OP for our 3rd Battalion, OP for our 2nd Battalion, and our CP direct line here. We have
Great.
radio communication direct to all rifle platoons and OPs, and telephone communications directly to all rifle platoons.
Pretty busy up here last night?
Oh, they had us going a little bit, but pretty quiet.
How much sleep did you get?
About 4 hours sleep,
Is that an average?
about average.
How do you stay awake?
Just keep drinking coffee, I guess.
How many cups of coffee do you average a night up here?
How many would you say, Sergeant?
Oh, I'd say about 8 or 10.
8 or 10 cups of coffee a night.
But that's these large cups.
What's that up on the wall there, right in front of us?
This right here. This establishes our MLR, approximately. And we have our coordinated fire plans with our support fires.
I noticed something else here in the room, a picture over here. What about that picture, Sergeant?
That's my girl.
87 days left.
Right, that's when I'm going home, I hope.
You got another picture up there on the wall, too. Who's that?
Oh, that's Marilyn Monroe.
You boys have got some beauties here in the CP.
Oh, they keep us alive.
Anything in particular, any action in particular last night up here?
Well, we had a contact patrol out, but no contact, so the enemies stayed away. But we hope to in the future to contact them so we get more information.
Okay, thanks a lot.
And then the truce negotiations that had dragged on through 2 years of communist stalling bore fruit. The enemy finally agreed to a ceasefire. July 27th, 1953, General Mark Clark signed for the United Nations.
We have stopped the shooting. That means much to the fighting men and their families, and it will allow some of the grievous wounds of Korea to heal. Therefore, I am thankful. It is, however, only a step toward what must yet be done. The task now is to put the ceasefire agreement into full effect as quickly as we can and get down to working out an enduring settlement of the Korean problem. I cannot find it in me to exult in this hour. Rather, it is a time for prayer that we may succeed in our difficult endeavor to turn this armistice to the advantage of mankind. If we extract hope from this occasion, it must be diluted with recognition that our salvation requires unrelaxing vigilance and effort.
And there wasn't much of a celebration with the coming of the truce, unless you'd call Operation Big Switch that, the liberation of thousands of United Nations personnel who had become prisoners of the enemy. Maybe you found some exultation there in the tired eyes and drawn faces and sometimes tortured minds and bodies of the men who were freed. A lot of them told their stories before going on to medical treatment and home.
In the roadblock at Connery on the night of November 30th, there was a sharp engagement, and I was to bring in the administrative trains. We never did get through. After we abandoned vehicles, we started out on foot to walk through.
My name is Major John Dozier, Richmond, California. Captured on the 1st of January, 1951.
When were you captured, Sergeant?
December the 1st, 1950.
What unit were you with at that time?
Sea Battery, 503rd Field Artillery Battalion.
What division was that?
2nd Division,
Where were you at the time?
just north of Connery.
My name is Warrant Officer Dwight E. Cox, Fresno, California. I was captured on December the 1st, 1950, near Connery.
Could you tell us where you were captured and how it happened?
Well, the place I don't know. It wasn't a patrol.
Wonsan, Taijon, Bloody Ridge, Seoul, Ham Hung, Incheon, the Yalu. Piece together their stories, and you have the war.
I'm a fighter pilot. We got in there first. Same day the UN called for help in South Korea. Together with bombers stationed in Japan, we helped slow them down a bit, till ground troops could hustle over to Korea.
I was with one of the first U.S. Army combat outfits to arrive in Korea, Busan, the 1st of July, 1950. We hardly took time out for coffee before we were on the road, headed for action. It didn't take long to catch up with it. The front was moving our way. It didn't take us long either to find who had armed the Reds. Captured tanks, vehicles, guns, made in Russia. We just didn't have enough stuff in Korea yet to stop the advance. But after they overran us at Osan, we moved on to reinforce the key city, Daejeon, to try to hold its defenses. Stall for time. We took a terrible beating. We were forced to withdraw, almost back to Busan.
With a small beachhead left around Busan and the whole North Korean army pressing hard, American forces staged a major maneuver. The amphibious assault at Incheon.
I was there at Incheon. The Navy gave it to them good. Then we moved in and ashore. There wasn't too much left to argue with. We caught the enemy there almost completely by surprise. And then we hit the road for Seoul, the captured capital of South Korea. The whole idea was to hit hard and fast. Keep moving so the North Korean army couldn't readjust itself to the Incheon end run. 9 days after the first landing, we were at the Han River just outside Seoul, crossing in force against rough resistance. We approached the city from 3 sides. The closer we came, the more fanatical the resistance. Then we fought our way through the suburbs and on into the streets of Seoul itself. The battle for Seoul was about as tough as street fighting comes. We had to blast them out from barricades, the tops of roofs, and basements. But just 11 days after we landed at Incheon, we finished up the liberation of Seoul. After Seoul, we linked up with forces that pushed all the way from Busan. Then we headed north along the coast. It was hard going at first. The enemy was stubborn. Then we slammed across the 38th parallel and started to pick up speed. We were moving so fast by the time we hit the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, part of our supplies had to come by air. The Communist army that had driven across the 38th parallel less than 5 months before was just about smashed, and we shoved right onto the Yalu River, borderline between Red North Korea and Manchuria in Red China. Yeah, on the banks of the Yalu, we figured the war was over. A little mopping up, and that would be it. The Korean prisoners we rounded up seemed to think so too. The fight was all gone out of them. Yeah, we even had a Thanksgiving dinner flown up to us. And we're wondering if we'd eat Christmas dinner at home. Then, a whole new war started. The Chinese struck from Manchuria, about 250,000 of them. Withdrawal. We had to pull out. The troops on the eastern flank, around the Changchin Reservoir, headed back for the seaport of Hungnam. Even though 6 Chinese divisions were trying to bust it up, the withdrawal rolled right along. One Marine Corps commander kind of set it for all of us when he commented, "Retreat, hell, we're just attacking in the opposite direction." And the evacuation at Ham Hong went off like clockwork, with an iron ring holding off the enemy around the perimeter of the port. 105,000 troops and 91,000 civilian refugees were taken off. We saved more than 17,000 vehicles and 350,000 tons of equipment. And while we were at it, we weren't leaving anything usable to the enemy. Fuses set, and the last man out. And that was the end of Hungnam.
Falling back of the 8th Army from the western sector of the front was another masterpiece of withdrawal. Pressed by 6 full Chinese Communist armies, with 4 more in reserve, UN troops pulled back a full 150 miles, protecting its own flanks and fighting a rearguard action most of the way. Across the Chongchon River from Unsan to Kunuri, a lot of heartbreaking miles, and going the wrong way. Pakchong to Suncheon, Suncheon to Pyongyang, falling back past the Red Korean capital over hard-won ground. An exhausted army, but an unbeaten one. It held together through one of the longest sustained withdrawals in history. An orderly pullback, but managing to move faster than the pursuers, fighting them off when they came too close, costing the enemy huge casualties, holding them up when necessary to allow a reserve to build in back for a stand. And they burned their bridges behind them. The hardest pill of all to take, back across the 38th parallel, the line the aggressor had violated to plunge the United Nations into an unwanted, ruinous war. Seoul, the capital of a free Korea, evacuated in the path of the enemy, bringing further tragedy to a stricken people who only wanted their liberty and peace. On back, south of Seoul. And then, with the threat of being swept from all of Korea, the UN forces faced around at Wonju. The long withdrawal was over. The enemy had failed to turn it into a rout, and our army had escaped from the trap in fighting shape. Mines, guns, armor to make a stand. They took everything the enemy had to throw at them, and then they were ready to hit back. The middle of February 1951. Counteroffensive.
I was in on that. We punched forward. It was only then we got some idea of what our withdrawal had cost the enemy in the way of losses of men and materiel and overextended lines. Not that it was easy, but we found that a lot of the sock had gone out of them. And I don't mind admitting it was a lot better feeling going the other way, due north. Everybody felt it. And the attack moved up, coordinated like it was a maneuver in training camp. Ground-air liaison, they used to call this back in the training manuals. The team on the ground calls the shots. The Air Force delivers it. And it worked just fine. The artillery gave it to them round the clock. Blasting the Reds where the observers thought it would hurt worse, and clearing the path in tight spots for the infantry. By the end of March '51, we were back across the parallel and retaking our positions in the hills north of Seoul.
The Chinese were to make one more real try, their biggest of the war. April 22, 1951, 21 Red armies hit the UN positions, 630,000 men against our 230,000. They had announced on the radio that they were going to take Seoul back, and in the face-saving way of the Orient, that literally meant to do it or die. They came at our troops with blaring bugles in human waves, regardless of cost. No force on earth could have withstood that initial shock. But at Seoul, we held. Our defense position in the battle had the code name Golden Line. It was 24 carat. The capital had been taken for the last time. The UN command mounted its own offensive a few days later. The enemy was again forced back across the 38th parallel. We hit into the hills again, this time to stay. On 10 July 1951, Red officials met with United Nations representatives to talk about a truce. With the same senseless disdain for sacrifice of lives that started the war, the communists stalled through 2 years of bloody deadlock. Before extinguishing the Holocaust they lit. The men of the UN command broke down their fortifications and moved back from the positions where they never wanted to be, but from which they wouldn't be pushed. General Clark had spoken for all of them.
We have stopped the shooting. That means much to the fighting men and their families. and it will allow some of the grievous wounds of Korea to heal. Therefore, I am thankful. It is, however, only a step toward what must yet be done. The task now is to put the ceasefire agreement into full effect as quickly as we can and get down to working out an enduring settlement of the Korean problem. I cannot find it in me to exult in this hour. Rather, it is a time for prayer that we may succeed in our difficult endeavor to turn this armistice to the advantage of mankind. If we extract hope from this occasion, it must be diluted with recognition that our salvation requires unrelaxing vigilance and effort.